what is an application or an app? The modern term is an app, right? But back in the old days, we used to call these things applications, right? Is an application this, right? Your piece of code, software sitting somewhere doing its job? Or is in the year 2020 something much, much more broad? Well, it's much more broad. Your application, especially in the world of serverless and the cloud, includes your infrastructure, your resources, your user pools, your data storage. All of these things are, in essence, part of your application. How do you group those things? How do you put all of those things in one bucket? No pun intended. How do you assign metadata to it? How do you add specific cost centers, contact people to that application? You may have an external database, or we may talk about a service that can help you with all of that. My name is Darko Mesaros, and I'm your friendly local developer advocate. And today I have Ed Mahlum here with me. And Ed, tell us who you are, what do you do, and why should we care?
It's nice to see you again, Darko. So my name is Ed Mahlum. I am with AWS and a product manager with AWS Service Catalog. And
Okay,
you should care because we have some exciting new stuff to talk about today.
exactly. Today we're going to be talking about new service. Well, or what did you just service? Let's classify it as a service called AWS App Registry. It is part of Service Catalog, but AWS App Registry is this wonderful service that can. I won't spoil the rest. We will be talking what this thing does, how does it do it, and hopefully we will be getting a nice, sweet demo. And the demo is up to my liking. It's all in the command line, so I hope you enjoy a lot of terminal. So Ed, welcome, and let's talk. Let's talk about this application, this metadata for app. Well, this problem. The problem we're trying to solve for you, our customer, right? What kind of
Hmm.
problem did you, Ed, try to solve for me? I'm your customer. What did you try to
Right.
solve for me?
Yeah. So I have one of these as well. Just
You have yeah, the Sked Bros. There
exactly.
you go.
But you probably know that today, when you're building applications on AWS, they're a little bit more complicated than they were back in the day when they were sitting on a 5 and a quarter floppy.
Exactly.
Oftentimes, your applications are going to span multiple stacks. They're probably going to live across multiple environments. And as you mentioned, before, there's probably a lot of information that you're going to want to track about this application. And it's not just information that you want to track, but probably others that are like on your team or maybe other people in your company that are going to want to track associated with that application. And right now, or up before App Registry, there was no AWS abstraction that lets you capture that complete definition of an application. And
Got it.
that's where that's where App Registry steps in. So App Registry provides an AWS abstraction to collect all of your application resources
Okay.
and all of your application metadata or sort of information about your application in
Okay.
one place.
But okay. Um, let's say I have this application, and this
Yeah,
application is a donut shop application. Sells amazing donuts,
yeah,
and it runs. I deploy it through CloudFormation. I have multiple stacks of it, multiple different things as a proper application should have. Um, can't I just use tags? Um, I guess yeah. Right.
right.
Yeah.
So you're saying, hey, I mean, how do I solve this today? Is that sounds like you
Exactly. Yeah.
could,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we do. We see that customers are using tags, and you might very
Hmm.
well be using tags.
Yeah.
But there's a few challenges with tags that we're addressing with App Registry. So tags are great,
Yeah.
uh, but they're limited in terms of one, it's a key value pair. So you're somewhat limited in the amount of information that you can store in a tag.
That is
You're
true. Yeah.
also limited in the number of tags that you can use.
Yeah.
So that also limits you a bit. And finally, what we found is that oftentimes this information that you're storing about your applications, it's not necessarily static. It can change over time. And if that information changes and you're storing it in effect, on your resources as tags, updating and maintaining that information is a little bit problematic.
And so,
So yeah,
how do
with App
how, yeah,
yeah,
how do customers do this right now? So before app registry, right? Before we talk
yeah.
about,
So well, I think tags are one way that we
yeah,
see customers doing it. you might also have an ITSM or an ITOM tool, right?
That's
And
critical.
and that
Yeah.
might be a place that you're keeping track of your applications. And those are great as well. However, one of the challenges we see with that is when you get to the cloud, your resources can be ephemeral and can change. You mentioned, serverless apps, for
Yeah.
instance, and so it's hard for sometimes those solutions to keep up with what's actually running in the cloud. And if those definitions get out of date or out of sync, then suddenly that becomes less useful to you. Finally, another way that we see customers solving this problem is they're just building their own solutions from the ground up, using things like DynamoDB and such. But the reason we've built AppRegistry is to take some of that undifferentiated heavy lifting off off of your shoulders, and provide that as a service.
As we do, right?
As
No
we do.
more as a non-native English speaker, when I have to say undifferentiated heavy lifting, I always have to slow down. But yes, absolutely. Take all the big problems away from your back and leave it over to us. But no, this brings a really fair point, because like I would think like, oh, I can just tag my application components. But then if that information is dynamic, like, changing phone numbers or support folks, relying for those resources, yeah, updating all the tags at scale can be iffy, or I cannot even add enough information. So,
Right.
great metadata store. So, okay, problem with, let's say, grouping application resources and adding a lot of metadata to them.
Yeah.
How does the lovely service feature, whatever you like to call it, AppRegistry, solve this
Yeah.
problem? What does it do?
Yeah. So what we do, and we've alluded to this already, but we're introducing an AWS abstraction for an application.
Okay.
And it's a single location. And you can think of it maybe like, one way we'd like to think about it as a container of containers for your application
Okay.
information and your application metadata. So you decide what stacks are associated to your application, and you do so declaratively. We
Okay.
will get to a fun demo here, and I'll show you this. But
Okay.
I think that's important, because the notion is that a stack can belong to one and only one application.
Right.
So that gives you sort of confidence when you're looking at a stack, you know which application it belongs to. And you can do this via the API and CLI to make those associations.
Okay.
You can then define this metadata. And so you have an application object, you have resources associated to it. The next piece of the puzzle is this information about your application or application metadata. So what AppRegistry introduces is the notion of, we're calling it an attribute group.
Okay.
And an attribute group is basically the JSON object, but it's defined independently. So you may, as a team, let's say your team, define a set of attributes that are important for you to track for your applications. And an attribute group can be associated to one or more applications.
Hmm.
And that's the power there. So if you maintain that attribute group,
So
that updated definition automatically gets associated. But what we anticipate is that within, companies like your own, let's say, you'll have different departments will want different views on the application. So it's not just your team, but for instance, finance or IT, perhaps like, your security or compliance groups. They're going to have their own view on an application, and they can in fact define and maintain their own attribute groups that get associated to that application. And that's where we get to this up-to-date picture of the
yeah.
application, not just in terms of resources, but also in terms of the attributes that are associated to the application.
But so this this basically, you add this JSON object, which is open, right? You can do whatever. You can
Yeah.
chuck data. What's the data limit on that? Like I'm thinking already. Can I store large amounts of data on this thing? But uh, so you do this on an application object, and any different part of your company can interact with it any way it wanted to, right? So answer me this question: how does one interact with this? Like, where do you see this fitting into your like workflow?
Yeah. What we anticipate, and the reason we started with the API CLI, is that this will be built into customers' existing DevOps
Okay,
processes,
so there's
right?
an
So,
API. Okay.
so because the key thing is that this information needs to be kept up to date. And in the world of the cloud, where things change all the time,
Hmm.
it needs to be automated. and so that the maintenance of the definition needs to be automated itself, which is, it's part of the challenge with some of the existing processes. So, you could integrate AppRegistry into your Jenkins workflows or your CI/CD pipelines or other DevOps automations that you have in place. So as you're provisioning out resources, those resources get associated to the application at the time of provisioning. And similarly, you can be defining and maintaining your attribute groups in similar kind of mechanisms through pipelines.
Okay, no, fair point. But so basically, this has an API, and you can plug that API into any of your existing applications or your workflows or your pipelines, whatever you want. If you require to consume this information of like this metadata or the general context of an application, that's pretty cool. Pretty cool. Do like it. And so my question here is like one of the things I kind of see this happening, especially when it comes to like partner software or ISV, like things like App Dynamics, Plunk, and all those pieces of software. I see them also benefiting from AppRegistry, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In fact, we announced AppRegistry last week.
Okay,
that's right. This has been kind of a blur.
It's been a very quiet announcement. I know somebody mentioned it to me. I'm like, what, really? It's already out. So, but yeah.
Yeah, no, we announced it, and as part of the announcement of AppRegistry, we did announce ISV partners who are looking to work with AppRegistry as well, and they included companies like AppDynamics, Apptio, Splunk, CloudTamer. So you're exactly right. I mean, AppRegistry provides a central definition of an application. Like I said, it introduces this app definition of an object, and so that's powerful. But these attribute groups also provide a place to store information about an application in a central place that's associated. So you can imagine if you have a solution that's doing some kind of analysis on the application, or that's a place that you can now place that, a summary of that analysis right there associated with the application.
Okay, that's very cool. But I think one thing I would like to see right now, Ed, is that wonderful demo of yours.
So, you want to do this? Okay.
So I would ask the lovely Mr. Eric to pop the screen on the screen and Ed to share the screen on the screen. So,
okay. So I should share now, Darko? Is that what
you go ahead, share the screen, and we'll have Eric pop it up as soon as it is in, and we will have a look at this demo. And one of the things for the sake of everybody else listening to us here, tell us, what are we going to do right now on the demo? Yeah. What are you going to do right now?
What am I going to do? And we're all going to watch. I'm going to take us through just the basic workflow of AppRegistry. We're going to do it at the CLI.
Okay.
And as we step through each command, I'll give some context for for the kind of information. I think it helps. It's one thing to talk about it; it's another thing to actually see it.
Exactly.
So we're gonna create a couple applications. We're gonna associate some attribute groups. We're gonna associate some resources, and then we're gonna ask some questions.
Okay.
And see if we can answer those questions. So, first of all, the first thing let's do, and we'll do this in sort of the order that we expect customers to do it in.
Okay.
Is we're going to create an attribute. We'll create a couple attribute groups. So let's see if you can see this. Yep, that's there.
Yes, we can.
So here we are. We're at the command line CLI, and we're going to call the create attribute.
Okay.
And when we create an attribute group, we give it a name.
Okay.
So in this case, it's it's a company. It's a data science, sales analytics, and we give it a description, simple description. That's all you need for an attribute group. But now here's the magic: is the JSON object.
Got it.
And in this case, it's simple. It's key value pairs, right? So it's a set of them. But that's still valuable, right? So we're telling us this is the department, this is the cost center, and this is the team. So this team might have multiple applications that they can associate this attribute group to. So we're gonna.
So you can actually take an attribute group and put them in multiple different applications, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's
yeah,
cool.
And we'll show that. So we've created this attribute group. Let's go ahead and create one more. We won't create a ton of them. But I wanted to do this one because it shows a little bit more of the strength of that JSON.
Mm-hmm.
So again, we give it a name, commerce payments. We give it a simple description. And in this case, the JSON, we have some key value pairs, but so we have the team and the type of app it is, and our SLA, runtime. But when we get to the support, you can see now we're going to nest. Okay, support includes both the phone, and then compliance, we're going to provide a list. These are simple JSON things, but still useful. So
my assumption here is that you can actually read it also from a text file, so you don't have to jumble JSON in a command line like this, but you can write the JSON. Right. Okay, cool, excellent.
So now let's create a couple applications.
Okay. So this would be the flow. You create attribute groups, you create applications, and then you paste on the attribute groups.
Then we're going to make the associations.
Okay, good.
Yep. So the first application we're going to create is a recommendation app.
Okay.
Again, we'll give it a description, and applications support tags. So we've talked about before. Tags are great, right? We love tags. So let's throw a couple tags on there: application ID, business unit, product line, name. Okay. And then these are things we can use elsewhere in our automation. So we're going to create that app, and we'll create one more application. We'll call it our payments app here. Again, I'm going to give it a name, a description. I'm going to give it some tags as well. So now we have two attribute groups, and we have two applications. So now what we need to do is actually create some associations, because these things standing by themselves don't do much, right? So first we're going to associate the attribute groups. So let's associate the attribute group, and we do it by name. So we're going to give the recommendation app, the corp data science sales analytics attribute group. We do enforce within AppRegistry uniqueness of the name, which is how we enable using names. It makes it easy, and it also makes it transportable as well within your code. So there we've associated that attribute group, and we're going to associate one more attribute group, the other attribute group we created, and we'll associate that one to our commerce payments attribute to our CC payments app. Kind of makes sense. So we now have an application with a couple attribute groups, and we actually have each application is associated to one attribute group. The last piece of the puzzle is to associate stacks to these applications.
So when we create an application, you create like an empty placeholder for an application. Okay, so just to kind of take a step in point in time here. So what we did right now is, well, actually not we. What I give myself too much credit. What Ed did right now is he created two attribute groups with some specific attributes, such as like support information or cost center information, yada yada yada. Yep. And then Ed created two applications, which are just empty placeholder things, objects, entities for an application, and Ed has actually associated those attribute groups, the things with the JSON objects, to those applications. Correct. And now we're going to be adding the CloudFormation stacks to the actual applications.
That's right. So as we mentioned before, you can have one or more, or actually zero or more CloudFormation stacks associated to an application. Once we associate a CloudFormation stack to an application, that's the only application that stack will be associated to.
Okay.
So so in this CLI command, what we're passing in is the name of the app, the type of resource, in this case CFN stack, and then the name of that stack. So we've now associated that stack, and we're going to associate one other stack to the other application. Give each application a single stack. Again, what we would expect is, in most cases, an application will consist of many stacks.
Got it.
But for this simple example, we'll just do one. So now we have a stack associated to each one.
Okay.
Yeah. So what's interesting now is we can start to ask them for this. For this demo, we're going to ask just some really simple questions. But first of all, let's just say, hey, make sure we haven't done anything. Everything is on the up and up. Let's look at the applications we've created. Should be two, right? We should have two applications. And in fact, there they are. So we've got our payments app, and we have our recommendation app
available
to you. The next thing that we might want to do is we want to say, tell me what attributes are associated to what application.
Okay.
And so I'm just going to put in a little command here onto this CLI. And this is going to say the attributes for our payment app, there they are. And then there's the attributes for our recommendation app. So you can see now that I can understand that association.
Okay.
Of course, since I only have one, you only see one there, but you could obviously have more than one being returned.
Okay, so use like a simple bash script here to use our CLI to get all the applications, and then for each application, show attributes assigned to that application. And in the bottom couple of lines, we see the raw JSON output.
Raw JSON.
Okay, that is pretty cool. And this is how you can actually use them through the CLI, of course. And my understanding is you can also use it through the proper API.
Yeah, proper API, and as we talked about at the beginning, really where we expect this to be is to be built into your tooling, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
We're showing this to give you an understanding of how it works and sort of the basic concept, but it's the integration with your tooling which is going to make this super powerful.
Okay, excellent.
So the last,
go ahead.
I have one more.
I'm sorry, I thought this was it.
Oh no, man, don't cut me off. The last question, I'll do this quickly, I promise you, Darko. Is we're gonna ask one more question and say,
Okay.
hey, I have a particular resource group, commerce payment apps, and I want to know which application it's associated to, or
okay, got it.
Right? So, oops, I didn't put anything in. So here you're going to see that it's going to say, hey, that's the payments app. So this is this kind of lookup that we expect, is that as you start to build this out, you're going to say, hey, I'm managing this attribute group. Like maybe it's an attribute group that tracks the classification, the PCI compliance classification for an app. I want to know all the apps that have this associated to it. And these are the kinds of queries you're going to start to run against it.
Amazing. I like this. And this is in fact a very visual representation of how this service works. There is no UI, there's no console. This is how you interact with the service. And hey, sometimes console is better. But console, when I say console, I mean the terminal is better.
Yeah.
So, okay, that would be the part with our demo. And I think we can use the last couple of minutes we have left to kind of slowly wrap up. Well, first of all, Ed, let me try to regurgitate what I've learned today, because you told me a lot about this service. So we need to find a way to define. Okay, let's go back to the floppy disk analogy.
Yeah, let's go back to our floppies.
So let's think that our application is sitting in this floppy disk. Now it's software only, but let's imagine it's also resources, right? And this is how we would group an application in a floppy disk.
Yeah.
The way we would add tags to resources, we could potentially add some small metadata to each piece of like code comments in our application. Let's call that tags. Yeah. But if we want to do more on an application-wide scale, we need these app registry attributes, which would in essence be this sticker, which we can add more things to a specific application. And we can take the copy of the same sticker and put it on, multiple diskettes and use it on multiple applications. But hey, application can only have the single set of resources. Yeah. So that would be kind of my imagination of this. But yes, this is a great way for you to group your applications, assign some metadata to it. And this metadata is not just something static that you put in a tag and hope that's it. It can be modified, edited, and managed by other teams, which is important, especially in big enterprises.
Yeah.
But before we go, I have a few questions for you regarding this service.
Okay.
Number one, when is it available and where?
Sure. It's available today.
Okay.
And it's available in all commercial regions.
Excellent. The big question of the day. Multi-account? Cross-region?
It is not multi-account and not cross-region. That's an important point, and I'm glad you brought it up.
Okay.
So yeah, today that's the case.
It's important that the people who listen to this know that limitation. The pricing, how does pricing work?
Sure. So as we talked about at the beginning, AppRegistry is a feature of AWS Service Catalog.
Okay.
Service Catalog has a pricing model, and AppRegistry builds off or uses that same pricing model, which is an API-based pricing model. So you pay per call. However, you get the first 1,000 calls per account, per region, per month for free. The notion is that the spirit of the pricing is, if you want to try this out and get set up, it's effectively free.
Got it.
However, if you start to use it at scale, you'll start to pay, and the price per call is at 0.0007, 3 zeros and then a 7
Okay.
cents.
Okay,
So
that's a small number. Okay. Excellent. So, Ed, before we wrap up, anything you would like to say to the folks listening to us, the people who are interested in potentially checking out the App Registry? Where do they start? What should they do? And yeah,
Well, we said it's live today. It's available. I would highly encourage you to go, check out App Registry and try out the API, the CLI, and see how it fits your needs. If you're working with applications on AWS and you're facing any of the challenges we talked about today in terms of
yeah,
keeping track of the resources associated with your application and/or data, which from what we talk to customers, that seems to be a pretty common pain point.
yep,
I would love to have you try out the service, and if there's anything there that doesn't quite work for you or fit your
yeah,
needs, please reach out because
yeah.
we're
Reach
always
out.
yeah, exactly. We'll be putting more effort into it in the coming year.
Yeah, reach out to us, and I am available on the social media. So find my name on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever. Feel free to scream at me if you have feedback and things, and I'll get it to Ed. So
Yeah, and then Darko will scream at me.
exactly. Well, thank you, Ed. Thank you very much for this. And so when initially Ed and I discussed this, I was really not sure what App Registry is, and I came to Ed like, so Ed, what does this do? And then, well, he enlightened me quite a bunch. So I really know where this feature and service fits in, and I hope we manage to translate the same message to you.
Awesome.
Now, thank you, Ed. Thank you very much, Ed, for being here with me.
Thank
Do
you.
join.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Do join me for the next session, which is coming up in a couple of minutes. I'm going to be back in the same thing, speaking to some other folks. But yeah, Ed, thank you very much. And everybody, I wish you the lovely rest of the day.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Awesome. Bye bye.